All right, I am back with a Destiny 2 video. I actually wanted to make this right after the Frontiers debut happened on Monday after initially discussing it, but a ton of stuff happened between now and then, and I got distracted. But this is obviously the biggest change to Destiny in recent memory, essentially, since they did the switch to seasons instead of DLC. The new roadmap, just to recap, is two big expansions a year. Big in quotes. They're more medium expansions because they are not going to be the size of the current expansions we have. Allegedly, they're going to come out every 6 months, but we know how Bungie's schedules tend to slip and they stretch, so we'll see. The first is summer 2025, and that's after these episodes end. Then the next would be winter 2025, presumably 6 months later. During that, there are four major updates, which they're not calling seasons, they're not calling episodes because they are different than all of those, and those have their own kind of things attached to them with different loot and different featured mission rotators in the portal, this new thing where you play all the activities and you launch the featured ones from there. I think it was DMG who asked initially what questions people had about this, because they shared 10,000 words of blog posts about various things, but a ton of questions kind of still remain here if you stop and you really think about what was presented and what was not presented. I wanted to go through a few that I had, and some people are saying some of these are answered, but I'm not so sure about that. I'd say the one that comes up the most is this idea where it says under expansion, it says new raids and dungeons. And people are interpreting that to mean there's going to be two raids and two dungeons. So each expansion, Apollo and Behemoth would get a raid, and then each would get a dungeon at some point during its release schedule, presumably a raid at launch, and then a dungeon in the second half, so on and so forth. I find this very hard to believe in a way that that doesn't make sense to me at all. I think the plurality here is speaking to the general concept of expansions having raids and dungeons in them. I don't think that means two and two. I mean, think about Destiny's current schedule. They do one major raid every year and a half because that's how long it takes to get to a new full-size expansion. So doing two full raids within a year or every 6 months in an era when they're trying to scale back, development and resources devoted to this on top of doing two dungeons, that does not seem like something that's going to happen or that makes sense in any reasonable capacity. I think the exceptions to this could be maybe they do one original, they're at least going to do one original raid, in the year. Maybe the other one could be a reprise raid. Obviously, we only have one more Destiny 1 reprise raid to come back, Wrath of the Machine. I think that might be one of the hardest ones to bring back because you got to do all the Siva Fallen and all that stuff, and maybe that's why it's been saved so long. They also have vaulted a number of original Destiny 2 raids, so maybe that would be something that they can bring out of the vault, although that obviously comes with its own level of work and stuff, and that's not exactly quote unquote easy. You have to rebuild everything more or less and relight everything with the new engine tech, which is why a lot of sunsetting happened or vaulting happened in the first place. You could also maybe think that these aren't, if there are two, these aren't full raids. These are raid layers, some smaller version of raids that are more akin to what we saw with the Leviathan layers. I don't think that's the answer. That would strike me as very odd if that was actually what they were planning to do. I feel like they would have said that. So my guess is that there won't be more than one raid between these two expansions, and just because it's plural there, I don't think that means what we think it might. Two dungeons, yeah, I can buy two dungeons, mainly because they want to sell the dungeon pass. I'm really sure that they still want to sell the dungeon pass, if not by itself, as part of the bundle at the beginning of the year, because that's something you kind of roll into that for, quote, extra value, which leads me to my next question. How much is this going to cost? Because right now, the general cost for this kind of thing is $100 for the expansion, the seasons or episodes, and the dungeon pass. Now, there are no seasons. There are major updates, and these major updates are free. There are rewards passes, which presumably cost, I'm guessing, as much as seasons do now, or maybe less, but I kind of doubt it. And then there are two smaller expansions, and then maybe there's a dungeon pass. I would be surprised if this was not still $100, even if I believe the total volume of content is going to be significantly less than what we're seeing currently. That is like the point of this, is they have to make less content overall. But I would be genuinely very surprised if they drop that to like 80 or something. Maybe they could. Maybe that's what they're going to do to try and draw more people back, so it's not, sort of an insurmountable cost for some people to do everything year by year. I think they are going to almost certainly sell the expansions separately. But again, there's no like real bundle with the seasons, because the seasons aren't things that cost money. It's literally just a rewards pass. In terms of the expansions, it seems very clear that the major updates themselves are not coming with any story components, because nothing is listed in that section, but the expansion section has new stories, new missions. Is the entire story self-contained to the expansion? That seems likely, but I don't know if we have full clarity on that. And then also, like, how long does this continue? Because they talk about, these new ideas for campaigns where you can go, the non-linear one is happening in Apollo, and you can go in different directions. But still, that I wouldn't imagine that's going to be something that's like super time gated. So what is happening with story after that ends? Is there still going to be like weekly story content like a season? Like, even obviously if it is like a 6-month block and that only lasts a month or two or something, is that something that's going to still happen with like story developments along the way? And that's something I don't think they've addressed at all. Even if it's not attached to the major update, I'm wondering how long story content continues, because that is a reason a lot of people come back to log in at Reset. Are they going to do these like huge gaps where it's like, oh, we're going to take 2 months off and then there's some more story stuff? Like, is that going to be their plan to keep people engaged over 6 months? I don't know. None of that is listed, so we just don't know. It also says that each expansion, well, it says new locations. So like new raids, maybe it's not necessarily true that each expansion has a destination, but in theory, you could see how that would happen, because we could be back in the days of Curse of Osiris and Warmind, where those were larger DLCs, and I'm assuming that Apollo and Behemoth are going to be bigger than like DLC like that we got from that era. But those obviously gave us new destinations. It's just, does locations mean destinations? I feel like destinations are like, okay, here's a new full zone, a full planet, whatever. In this case, the idea is that we're going to like new alien planets as opposed to just staying in our system. But I also would view a new location as like, can a location be within an existing zone? Like, are we going to open up another part of Nessus or the EDZ or Neptune or something as a quote new location? Or does location definitely mean destination? And are we definitely getting 2 of those? And if we are getting these, what scale are they? Because obviously there's a big scale difference between, say, Mercury, the circle planet, and Nessus or the EDZ or something that's just enormous. So we don't really know that yet. And the cadence of like 2 full size destination, like true destination planets every 6 months, again, that seems tough. Maybe they can do it if this is sort of the main thing they're focusing on and they're not doing real seasons and things like that. We'll see. I'm also wondering, in terms of cycling in new gear, how does that compare to what we're getting now? So like, these episodes have a good amount of gear. There's like 10 pieces of original episodic gear. There's 4 reprise things. Seasons had at least like 6 weapons and reprise things, and then there's dungeon loot and playlist loot and raid loot and stuff. Like, is it going to be the same level as that? I'm not necessarily even saying it should be, because I think we're sort of drowning in weapons at this point, and like, they might release 14 weapons a season and like 2 of them are worth getting. So I don't even know if that's necessary. I'm just wondering if that is the case. I am also wondering about the list of old activities that they are reprising, because that is part of the seasonal update thing. The coil is on that list, onslaught is staying on that list, but what else is coming back that we might not know about? Best case scenario, they're gonna unvault Menagerie or something, but I think that strikes me as unlikely. So I'm wondering kind of what seasonal activities they'll go back to, and there are new ones, but I'm also wondering what the scale of those is going to be. Is the scale going to be onslaught or the coil, or is the scale going to be, the patrol mission from, the Vex episode this season or something? Or are they going to be like Battlegrounds? Are they just going to keep doing Battlegrounds? I don't think we know. And just saying new activities is a pretty broad classification that I don't think we don't know how many, we don't know the scale of these, stuff like that. What's going on with exotic missions? That is not really listed here. That, usually was something attached to season, like, every other season or so we get an exotic mission. The seasonal updates don't say new missions, and exotic missions are missions. So are those just going to be contained into the expansions? Like, will there be at the tail end of the expansion when there's nothing else to do, is that when we'd be getting potential new exotic missions or not? Speaking of exotics, one thing listed in the rewards pass is exotic weapon and ornament, legendary weapon and armor ornaments. So the rewards pass is paid and the updates are not paid. So, $10, $15, whatever it's going to be, listing exotic weapon in the pass and legendary weapon in the pass, are those going to be exclusive now? Like, obviously now there's an exotic weapon in the pass, but it's also like on the free track. But if the rewards pass is now the only paid thing in this, are they still going to like put that in a free track or in the game or something? And it says legendary weapon singular. So like, is there going to be some exclusive legendary weapon in the rewards pass that other people can't get? And like, that would be a little confusing because that would kind of branch out from what we have now, but it is somewhat unusual that I think that they put that in there. Again, it could just be how it works now, where there's a free track and you get that stuff, but that's something I'd want clarified. What else? They said that they're not doing like real, quote, sunsetting again with weapons, but are they kind of doing it? Because they said you can, quote, bring all your existing weapons up to the power level of current weapons, but are they operating within this new tier system? Like, is a tier level getting slapped on all your old weapons, and are they converting over to the tier system, whether they're tier 1 to tier 5 or anything like that? Are they getting, are tier 5 weapons getting more abilities to enhance origin traits or something? Or is this going to be another situation where things are just not added? Like, they reissued some weapons with origin traits or something that existed already, but they almost never like switch existing weapons to something better. It's like you have to re-earn stuff. So even though if things are like the right power level, I do wonder, and this kind of aligns with what I heard a while ago, that it's like a form of like soft sunsetting where the new weapons are going to be, power crept a little better, but you can still, technically use your old weapons. So I'm wondering how that's going to work out with the new tier system. We also know that armor is getting the new tier system too, in terms of, the hardest activities will drop the best armor, but does this mean anything past just what we have now with like, quote, good armor, which is high stat, good distribution, and then an artifice slot in, the best armor acquisition areas? Like, is anything changing with armor? Is that still just what it is? Because they even talk about how like the armor chase is boring. They said that in the thing, but they also didn't mention they had a whole thing about rewards, and it was like all about weapons, and there was nothing about armor other than armor is getting the tier system. And all I can assume there is like, it's just a stat range. Like, you have garbage stats at tier 1 and they slowly get better until tier 5 is like really good stats and an artifice slot. But like, again, is that it? Is that all it is? That would kind of suck because armor has needed a rework forever, and it, at least right now, doesn't sound like it's getting that. There's probably more. I don't know if I remember my full list here, but those are some of the initial questions I have. Feel free to ask your own in the comments. I could do another video if there's enough additional questions, because Lord knows I'm not remembering everything. But yeah, lots of questions despite all the stuff they have said. And they said, they're going to be explaining more as time goes on, but this is the kind of stuff I would like to see answered. So anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you later. Take care.